If there's one positive the coronavirus pandemic has highlighted, it's our need to connect with the outdoors. But here in the Surrey Hills, wildlife are under threat. Plants, insects and animals are all at risk of disappearing because of global warming. The Surrey Wildlife Trust manages thousands of acres of countryside, and its Chief Executive, Sarah Jane, is going to explain why we need to preserve it.
When I was a kid, we would walk through a field and you'd have clouds of butterflies coming up around you. And there are very few places now where we experience that. And they're really important as part of our pollinator species. We've lost over 42% of those in recent years. Again, if we look at our bumblebees, we've lost over 40% of those. So these are examples of species which for many of us would have been common just 30 years ago when we were children. We're currently in a situation where we have a climate crisis. We also have an ecological crisis. We have a health crisis as we're experiencing at the moment. Many of these things are attributed to the fact that we are losing our natural environment and losing our nature. And one of the things that we've noted in particular is that actually, as well as being in decline, nature can also provide us with the solution. We at the Wildlife Trust are saying is let's protect 30% by 2030 of our land for nature, which we're calling Wild Belt. Wild Belt is a designation which basically says to people in this area, an area like this would be included, we're going to do what we need to do to look after nature, to bring back the birds, the butterflies, the small mammals, the shrews, the water voles that we're desperate to see in the county again. At the moment, we're talking to government about it, and you might have heard Boris Johnson in Prime Minister's Question Times talking about having wild belts all over the UK as one of the ways in which we address the threats of climate change.
The warming climate is not only causing marked ecological changes, higher temperatures cause the air to hold more water vapour, which brings more intense rain and leads to more flooding. Longer, hotter summers, which are more likely with the rising temperatures, create the right conditions for wildfires to take hold and occur more frequently.
We have had more wildfires and are seeing an increase both in the frequency and also the severity of the wildfires. We're very, very close here to Thursley National Nature Reserve, which is one of our most precious lowland heathlands, and that had a very serious fire last summer, and actually the consequences of that for wildlife and for people can be quite serious. Paradoxically, we also experience huge amount of flooding, and that's another thing that we're seeing an increase of. And one of the interesting things about Surrey is that actually in the very serious floods a few years ago, we had worse flooding here in Surrey than in places like the Somerset Levels, which again, people don't necessarily realise that this is a very wet county. Luckily, we do know what to do about it. We know that nature provides the solutions, so we can put in natural flood management schemes, for example, to help slow the flow of water and soak up the water. An area that we're standing in now is a really good example of being able to store water and relieve those flooding problems.
There are answers to the climate emergency, but we all need to help out.
And so there's something that we can all do. Most importantly, that we think about it and think about how we introduce nature into every space that we have.